I'm dying. This is what it feels like. This is what's happening to me right now in this moment. I'm dying. And I accepted it. No fear. I accepted it. Not that I wanted to die, not at all. There was this acceptance and I didn't question it. It was like, no, this is what's going to happen. It's okay. It's almost like I've been there before, or that feeling felt like home.
Hello, passionate listeners and watchers. Welcome to Passion Harvest. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are in the world right now. I'm Louisa, your host, and I'm so excited about our guest today, Christopher Kito. Chris Kito went into anaphylactic shock from a food allergy, and it led him to a life-changing near-death experience. Chris's NDE completely changed his life. This is his story and this is his passion. Chris Kito, so honored and excited to have you on the show today. Welcome to Passion Harvest.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad we could finally connect and get this on the books to be together.
I'm honored and excited. I can't wait to hear about your near-death experience, but also the after effects and the healing process afterwards. So if you wouldn't mind getting started on the lead up to your near-death experience, and we'll take it from there.
Absolutely. Again, thank you for having me and being a part of your show. I had a near-death experience about 9.5 years ago. And speaking about this now has been a long process. I only started speaking about this about a year ago. And it was very difficult. And every time I go into my experience, my hope is, and the reason why I speak about it is to share. One, I find it healing for myself to discuss it. And the second reason is to share with others, because I was there when I heard about other NDE stories, and that sense of community and that feeling and having others there to support when you are in a unique niche situation, or you have questions that you cannot go, or you might not, cannot go to friends or family, or you may not have the community readily available. It's really helped me tremendously. So, sitting here, I'm so thankful for the opportunity and the ability to possibly connect on a very special level with your audience and you providing this platform.
I'm delighted you're here.
Thank you. With that, I was born and raised in Long Island, New York, in the United States. And after college, I went to school in Connecticut. And my whole life, I had a very ideal American upbringing, played lacrosse, was a lifeguard in the summers. I was the oldest of 3 boys, all around wonderful. When I was a child, I was diagnosed with a peanut and tree nut allergy from an allergy test. So up until, really throughout my adolescence, my teenage years, and then throughout college, I never had a significant food reaction or anaphylactic reaction or allergic reaction to food. I very simply, as many people with allergies, you work to avoid the allergen. And that worked. And, you'd have the epinephrine, which are the EpiPens everyone hears about and people with allergies carry. And, they last about a year, and, I had them and didn't know always where they were. Didn't know if they were expired or not. They expire after about a year, and, you have your yearly checkup, maybe you'd be a few months off, and we get some new pens, or maybe we wouldn't. And, it was not something that was top of mind. And that's, and these little behaviors over years can have such a magnitude effect down the road. And in any near-death experience and story, it's always the details that have such a massive impact on the experience and what the outcome is and where you go from there. So this is where my consciousness was at this point with regards to my allergy. And, very fortunate, grew up in a family where my mother was a teacher for many years, and she had a PhD in holistic medical philosophy. So my father was in the insurance industry, and I always said I was a bit of a capitalist hippie.
Right.
So went to college with some crystals, went to business school with some crystals on my work desk. That's the best way to kind of sum it up. And then after I graduated, I decided to move to Los Angeles. So I went about 3,000 miles away, and I was starting my career there. And at this time, I recently turned 24, and I was, learning to be in a new city, be on my own. No family in the area. I didn't know anyone. Really, the joke was I always just washed ashore in Los Angeles because there was never any plan to really go. It just kind of came up, and there was nothing that really resonated when I was 22, 23 with New York for myself. And, that's something a lot of people I feel can relate to as well. I don't feel anything here. And, I made the decision that, we have to make a change. And I was very fortunate I did that. And I was at a friend's birthday party on a Sunday evening, and it was a normal party that everyone's gone to. Everyone's talking, mixing around, hanging out, discussing whatnot. And they started to serve pieces of cake to everyone at the party. And you're just passing cake around. You take a slice, I take a slice. Again, nothing out of the ordinary. We've all done this many, many times. Any birthday party, same exact situation. And it looked like a regular chocolate cake. And eventually I took a piece, and, you take a little bit of the tip of the cake, and you have a bite. And I took it and I had some, and I immediately realized something was off. And up until this point in my life, I've never had peanuts or tree nuts. I really don't know exactly what the taste is. I've had an idea because you could sometimes smell it. I've always avoided it. I would never go near it at all. I would even not go near any food products that said may contain that. I was pretty much very strict about it. And as anyone knows with food allergies, there's always a constant danger at any point. If there is allergens or there's cross-contaminations when there shouldn't be the allergen in the food, and accidentally there is through the kitchen or some instance like that. And in that moment, I took that bite of cake, and it was, half the size of a fork, the end of a fork, and I swallowed. And the moment I swallowed, I realized something was off. There was a different taste in my mouth because you're in conversation. And in that split second, literally a split second, I realized I ingested a peanut. So my first reaction was, uh-oh, what happened? And then I kind of looked at the cake and said, oh, wait a second, I think there's peanuts in here. Oh no, what happened? And again, I never had a reaction. I didn't know what would happen. I thought, well, this could be okay. Maybe I'll just take some Benadryl and we'll sleep it off. Wake up Monday morning, it won't be a big deal. We'll just, go from there. Let me go have some water just to, wash it out of my mouth. I had like a little itch in my mouth, but nothing. And I just said, all right, don't make a scene. We're just going to continue to hang out, and we'll be out of here in a half hour. And that's what happened, because I had no experience of what would happen if I were to ingest a peanut. I want to take a second here in the story. I'm going to do the best I can to give detail and accurately describe the events leading up to this. And again, I'll do my best. It's very hard because language is very limiting. And I'm going to try to really paint the picture and give the best descriptive detail. There's some things I just don't have words for, and we don't have language for later in part of this story. And again, if I do pause, I'm trying to find the best word and really the best way to convey what was going on in that moment to you and your audience.
Thank you for clarifying that. You're doing it. I'm sure you'll do a great job.
So everyone heads out of the party. I head home, take 2 Benadryl. I said, all right, we're going to sleep this off. It's not going to be a big deal. I'm going to, the Benadryl will help me sleep. No problem at all. All right, we'll go from there. So get in bed, hang out. And, you're laying there. It's always those moments where you have this creeping thought of, okay, is this going to get better? It's not going to get better. When there was no panic. I said, all right, I took the Benadryl. That should be okay. I've never had anything happen before. Who knows? Maybe my allergy is not as severe. Maybe it was
grown out of it.
Grown out of it. Absolutely. Who knew? We never crossed this bridge before. So it was fully in the unknown. I said, I don't feel so great. let me just get up. So I said, you know what? I really want to know where my EpiPen is. I'm sure it's somewhere. So I get up, I flick on, the bathroom light, and it's the brightness, and I start looking for the pen, and I find it, and lo and behold, it's expired by about 6 months. I said, all right. I heard these maybe work after the expiration date, but I don't know, because I've never used it, and I just kind of had them around, and I had to look for it. And I said, all right, we'll see how I do. Let me take another 2 more Benadryl. So we take 2 more Benadryl. Now we're 4 Benadryl in. All right, let me go back to bed. We'll see how I feel in another half hour. So I'm laying there, starting to feel warm, starting to think, well, how's my breathing? How do I feel? Am I kind of itchy? Am I warm? That creeping feeling of, am I making these feelings up, or are they really happening in this moment? Yeah. And we've all been there. Yeah. Like, is it really bad? And we don't know. And I said, am I overreacting? I said, geez, it's now, 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. I said, oh gosh, what's this turning into? Am I just going to be up for the next 3 hours staring at myself in the mirror? What's going on here? So then I get up, and another half hour, I'm like, all right, I just don't feel well. I'm starting to get a little more anxious. And, I go back and, flick the light on. Oh, it's bright, that whole thing. And I go, all right, I'm red. I have hives all over, neck, arms, underarms, face. My eyes are bloodshot. I said, all right, this is progressing in the wrong direction. I said, let me just lay down. We'll see how the Benadryl kicks in. Those other 2 may not have kicked in yet, and my body might just, be pushing it out, whatever. Again, we're playing mental gymnastics at this point. And I said, well, I got the EpiPen, and I know where the hospital is, and we'll go from there, and we'll take it minute by minute. So then I'm laying there, and I'm focusing on my breath, because I know with anaphylactic reactions, the threat is that your airway closes and you can't breathe. Yeah. And it's quiet. I'm just laying there in the room. It's dark, focusing on my breath, and I say, I feel it's getting more and more difficult to breathe. Just a little bit, heavy chest, little tightness in the throat. I said, all right, what am I going to do here? I don't think this is getting better. This could get much worse. What am I going to do? And earlier when we started speaking, I said, there's always the depth, the details are so important to any NDE story, because it's a half second too late, too early. One decision here, one decision there, different decision can completely change the outcome. So here I am, new to a city, alone, going into, which I'd later find out, a severe anaphylactic reaction, going into anaphylactic shock from a food allergy. Again, I had no idea the severity of what it could be, what could happen, what the feeling would be. Did not have a plan in place medically if this were ever to happen. I went 24 years and this has never happened, nothing even close. So what do I do? Do I call 911? What if the ambulance comes to the wrong house? What if they don't show up? Whether that's true or not, that was running through my head in this moment when panic or anxiety was setting in of, okay, I have to make the right decision, because this could be fatal if I don't. Do I use the EpiPen and then call 911? Does the EpiPen work? What happens if I use the epinephrine, the EpiPen, and I'm not able to make a phone call? Because when you administer the medicine, you can't function properly, and I couldn't dial or something. Gosh. Again, I've never had epinephrine. Do I drive myself to the hospital? Because I figure I have about 15 minutes. I think I could make it, and I know I could get there, and at least it's in my control, and I'm not just waiting. So I don't, looking back almost a decade later, I don't know why I made that decision, but I made the decision. I thought, all right, let me combine all three, and I'm going to take my EpiPen, which is expired, and I'm going to drive to the hospital, because it's roughly 10:30 on a Sunday night in Los Angeles, so no one's on the road. And in my almost 9 years of living in that city, there was very few nights I was driving at that time, and the roads were as empty as they were on that random April night in 2012. And that was just happenstance that it was that time and it was that day. If it was a Friday, Saturday, or a Monday, it would have been a very different story and a very different outcome. So at that point, I just threw on some shorts, grabbed my EpiPen, jumped in my car, and headed to the hospital. I remember driving and focusing so intently on just breathing, because it was cascading downward. It was getting worse and worse. The progression and my limited ability to breathe was getting harder. It was just getting harder and harder to breathe. And I'm panicked because you're trying to breathe and drive. And did I make the right decision? Am I going to get here? Okay, what do I do if I can't breathe and I'm still not there? Do I use the epinephrine? What do I do? Did I make the wrong decision? So I'm driving to the hospital. I pull in. I guess there was a valet and they kind of took the car. I gave them the keys and I went right into the emergency room. And again, I'm red. I'm covered in hives. I'm sweating. My eyes are bloodshot. I remember it being harder to move. My motor skills, it was more and more difficult to really do anything. And again, everything I was focusing on was breathing and getting in oxygen. And it just wasn't coming in. It was just a slow suffocation. And I get in there and I look at the nurse and I said, I'm having an allergic reaction. She looked at me and said, do you have ID? And I opened my wallet, and there's moments I vividly remember now that happened almost 9.5, almost 10 years ago. And I opened the wallet and I remember I could not get my hand to pull out my driver's license to hand them. It was too difficult. I didn't have the function anymore. It took everything to get there at that hospital. So I attempted to pull it out. And I remember falling and like leaning into the counter, and she jumped up, grabbed me along with another nurse, and they pretty much two women carried, and I'm about 6 foot, 180 pounds. They carried me back into the ER and they threw me on the bed. And at that point, doctors and nurses swarmed around me. And at that point, and that is when the NDE began. Up until that point, in the story, it's within 2.5 hours, we went from a normal birthday party, everything okay, to now I'm on a stretcher in a hospital, fighting for my life, fighting to breathe, suffocating. When I'm in the hospital, a lot of what I'm going to say now, I was later told after and all of that. I wasn't able to really communicate. Again, I was focusing on breathing. I remember being in this very much a euphoric, blissful state at this point, and not fully understanding the panic and urgency of the medical staff around me. I remember thinking, why are they so urgent? Why are they so panicked? And I was just trying to breathe, and they had the oxygen on me, and my oxygen levels were dropping. I was suffocating. I wasn't retaining oxygen. I wasn't pulling it in. My airway was extremely closed. The doctor was opening my mouth. They were trying to see if they could put a tube in. I later found out that was not an option because my throat was so closed off, they would not be able to actually physically insert it and get it to go down.
God.
And they had Benadryl shots going into my wrist. I had epinephrine coming in through my shoulder. I had everything pumping through me, trying to get me going, breathing. I was not responsive. I remember them asking me questions, and I remember not answering. I just can remember looking at them. And again, I'm in this blissful state, this euphoric state. in these moments. And the concept of time was gone. The physical aspect of pain was gone. Anxiety was gone. Fear was gone. Distress was gone. I was not, the energy was not of this world that I could have ever felt before or after that experience, those moments. And I remember thinking, and I don't even know if the right word is thinking, but a washed over conscious thought or feeling of, I'm dying. This is what it feels like. This is what's happening to me right now in this moment. I'm dying. And I accepted it. I
You
had
weren't afraid.
no fear. I was not, I accepted it. Not that I wanted to die, not at all. There was this acceptance and I didn't question it. It was like, no, this is what's going to happen. It's okay. It's almost like I've been there before, or that feeling felt like home. And there was nothing to be concerned of, nothing to be fearful of. It was absolutely okay. And I remember looking at just like the confusion around me, and I didn't understand it because here I am in this blissful, euphoric, loving state. And I remember the doctor looking at me because it's been a few minutes and I wasn't retaining oxygen. The epinephrine was not working. And I later found out sometimes the epinephrine doesn't work. You need multiple doses, or if you're too late in the stages of an anaphylactic reaction or into anaphylactic shock, it cannot be reversed. It's not always reversed. Sometimes you just pass a certain point and it doesn't matter. Or enough damage has been done because of lack of oxygen that there's not a lot to resuscitate, or you're coming back with some severe disabilities in this because I wasn't breathing. I wasn't retaining oxygen. And I'm just there. The doctor looks at me and says, I'm so sorry, I can't save you.
Gosh.
The epinephrine wasn't working. They could not put a tube down my throat. They could not have access because it was so swollen. It was swollen shut. And there was nothing else to do. Hope it works. Let's see how's this going to end. They did not know. Everything they were trying did not work, but they knew they could do. And that you could do in a situation like that because I was far into the anaphylactic reaction, even though it was delayed from when I initially had the peanut several hours early. So you could have something, an instant allergic reaction, or it could be somewhat delayed. In my case, it was delayed. And then it cascades rapidly into a very, very critical situation. And in this moment, I remember thinking, yeah, I'm dying. This is it. I'm okay. And again, going back, and this is where the language is so difficult because we really, the language does not, we don't have words for these situations or these moments or these feelings, but this washover of, now looking back on that situation, but in that moment, I vividly, the thought of the only thing that matters is love. Nothing physical, nothing material matters. Here I am, suffocating to death on a hospital bed. Nothing's coming with me. Nothing. I think I even remember thinking that having a new iPhone doesn't matter. But behind that is material items, possessions don't matter. Love is the only thing that matters. And no concept of time, euphoric, blissful feeling. And in that moment, I always grew up in a very spiritual household, and one of my grandfathers passed away prior to being born, for me being born, and my other grandfather passed away several years after I was born, very young age. And in that moment, they came to me, both my grandfathers, in I would say, telepathic, conscious communication, a all-knowing, a washover of feeling, knowledge, and emotion. a way that we do not communicate in our day-to-day reality of this consciousness. And they say, you can't die. You have work to do. And up until that point, I was accepting the situation. And then in that very moment, my communication with them, I switched over. I said, I said, okay. I'm thinking, you know, my response back is, okay. I don't want to die. No, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And in that moment, and again, the split second, this instant, I felt as if I shot back in my body and instantly hit with pain. And I remember the feeling of grabbing and fighting, like figuratively, like trying to grab oxygen, and this survival emotion and this raw, very raw desire to breathe and live. And, you know, again, a half second before that, euphoric bliss. Now I'm back fighting, scraping to breathe. I'm now responsive with the doctors. Everything's back. My senses are back. I'm in pain, trying to breathe. I'm now, fear is back. Fight is back. Emotion is back. Everything is coming back, flooding. And I'm fighting and scraping to breathe and pull in oxygen. And that went on for a few minutes until I eventually stabilized and calmed down and focused on breathing. And my heart rate came down. The anaphylactic reaction stopped. The hives started to go away. They kept pumping more and more epinephrine and Benadryl through me. And I then laid there. Now, at this time, I was not focused on the spiritual aspect or what happened or what I'm going through. It was a violent fight to survive. That's it. There was nothing lovey-dovey about that moment I came back. And I wasn't thinking about anything spiritual or happy, or it was just, oh my God, we're breathing. What happened? I'm in pain. I'm in a hospital. I'm hooked up to everything. That was it. There was no spiritual revelation. There was no emotional bliss. It was, oh my God, excruciating pain. I'm just focused on breathing. Am I going to be okay? Am I going to react again in 40 minutes? It's still in me. Is the medicine going to work? Am I okay? Is there going to be any damage? What happened? No concept of time. So hours go by. It's about, I later, again, I didn't have an idea of what was really happening this moment, but I was in the hospital for about 8 hours. And then at around 6 o'clock that morning, the nurses say, well, I guess you can go home if you'd like. And I said, I'm like, oh, okay. And I said, well, how was I when I came in? They said, we thought you were going to die. Out of a 1 out of 10, you were 9.5. Gosh. You were unrecognizable from the moment you came in to now we're going to discharge you. And I didn't, in that moment, you don't have the concept of how bad it was or wasn't bad, because you were just I was in a euphoric, blissful state. And then the second was you're scraping to survive. Everything else falls by the wayside. To be in that emotional, mental, and physical state of survival, everything else stops. And then later you can piece all the pieces back together, which I've been doing for the last 9 years of that moment and that night. So they gave me the little socks with the rubber on the bottom so you don't slip in the hospital. Right. And they gave me some papers and they said, well, here you go. So I walked out and found my car and had the ticket. And, I always joke, I really knew I survived when the first thing I did coming back was I paid for parking.
What a night. My gosh.
What a night. I knew I was back. I said, I'm back paying for parking. So did that. And then I headed home. And then for the next few days after that, I was really bedridden and I was just in pain. My body was rehealing from the trauma of that night. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I had no idea what an NDE was. I'd never heard NDE before. I didn't know what happened. The first few days, though, couple of days, it was just a physical, let me be able to move around without excruciating pain. And then from there, anyone that's had an NDE, or I'm sure your audience knows, there's a whole other aspect to that process in the NDE, where I say the NDE is 1% of the experience. The rest is the road after of healing, integration, what happened, processing, transforming, and moving forward.
Which is not always easy, as people might assume.
No, it's not. No. And I would say about 3-4 days after is when that started. Because the first few days was just physical pain and nothing went beyond that. And again, at that time, I had no idea what an NDE was. So I had nothing to go off of. I just knew a few things looking back in that time that was so pivotal. I kept a journal since I was 13. And I was very fortunate even up until now, I've always journaled. And looking back, I will sometimes look at those first 6 months after my near-death experience, and I wrote several times and underlined in large letters, my consciousness changed. Now, I had emotional changes, physical changes, consciousness changing that I wrote on numerous occasions after that. I've had a consciousness shift. Now, many times when people have that, it's years after healing, practicing, meditating. Mine happened in one violent night. I had no idea what was going on. And for the first 6 months, the 6 months after, I would wake up not knowing who I was. I knew how to tie my shoes, I knew math, I knew how to speak, but I did not know my emotional, mental hardware or what I valued. I woke up, I felt different. My reaction and thought process shifted completely. I remember just looking around and thinking, I don't even know myself anymore. Because there would be moments and my reactions would be different. I wouldn't know how to react. I wouldn't know what to think. I didn't understand why I was thinking something, because a month ago, I was like, well, I was doing this, or I had this. Now this is a priority, or this isn't, or why am I doing this? And it wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to do it, or I'm going to make a definitive change or habit. It just happened. But I realized it was happening. So then something would happen and I'd be like, well, what's going on? Who am I? And it was very difficult. I had no idea who I was. And then one night, about a month and a half later, I don't know how I came about it, but I stumbled across, through the grace of the universe, IAND's website, which is the International Association of Near-Death Studies, and I clicked on a link that said, did you have an NDE? And it had like 28 points, and I had 27 of the 28. So then the next morning I called, I said, listen, I'd like to talk to someone. I looked at your checklist, and I got like a 99 score on it. So they connected me with a facilitator in California. And I told her real quick, I said, hey, here's the quick story of what happened to me. I have no idea what's going on. Can you please tell me? I need some help. And she goes, oh, honey, you had a near-death experience. Listen, why don't you come up here and we'll talk some more? And at that moment, I had some direction on, one, what happened to me, where I was going, what I could possibly expect to happen, because everything was just brand new. I was just stumbling around in the dark with my emotions, my mental state, what happened to me physically. It wasn't something I was going to talk about, and pieces were coming back, and I thought, oh my God, what happened? I had this experience. My grandfathers were there, which I didn't talk about, and I was still like, am I going to be okay? Then you have the physical aspects of I went through a period where I had a lot of anxiety eating. with food. I remember there was one moment where I cooked spaghetti and I had this fear that there were peanuts in the pasta. And I threw it all out. Everything went in the garbage. And I just sat there. And I would only eat at some fast food restaurants because I knew they didn't have peanuts anywhere on the menu and they were franchised. And that was it. I would not venture out. So I had the physical aspect, the mental, emotional, spiritual that I was dealing with and recalibrating and figuring out this entire time while being in a brand new city for less than 6 months, entering adulthood, entering a career. I was getting into real estate at the time. All of this going on at the same time. It was quite the journey at this point and for the years to follow. And I never spoke about this for many years. It was too difficult. I attempted to several years after, and I got through about 50% of the story, and I left out pretty much most of the NDE. I just talked about really food allergies, and that was all I could really comfortably, and really, I couldn't even verbalize the story. So when I meet individuals say I didn't talk about it for 10, 20 years, I understand. It took me almost 10 years to discuss this openly. And even now, it's still difficult. It's distressing for me to speak about and go in there, but it is healing one and the same, which I'll get into shortly. So during this time, it was the focus is integration, transformation, understanding what happened, and moving forward. And it took years for me to get to the point to discuss this. And it was through meditation, yoga, sweat lodges, spiritual practices, you name it, I did it. I went on a healing journey with all different modalities and practices and experiences to really find myself, or, I don't even know if it was finding myself or reintegrating and redeveloping myself and transforming. Again, the language is so limiting when we start talking about consciousness and spirituality.
Well, the new version of Chris.
Yes.
That was evolving.
Absolutely. And at the same time of figuring that out, still being grounded and functioning in society and community and my career and being able to go about life while dealing with this enormous undertaking of spiritual transformation and really figuring myself out. Again, I walked out a different person, and I had to relearn myself, whether it be relearn or I had to understand or grow into who I was. And I really want to say, there are some, I'm sure your audience, and you've heard many NDE stories, there's not always that Oprah moment or that loving, beautiful, blissful, rainbows, beautiful, amazing. The actual NDE experience was very traumatic. It was very violent. It was scary. It was awful. The healing journey and integration in the years to follow were stressful, were lonely, were very dark at times of figuring myself out. It was not always wonderful. It was, I'd say at certain points it was awful. It was really, really difficult and tough on many levels, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, not being able to even physically, verbalize and experience that's heavy. That's very, very heavy. It took a lot of heavy lifting and years of going after this and really working through and getting to the point where it can be discussed. And I always want to share that side of this because it's so tough. And anyone of your listeners that have a near-death experience or a spiritually transformative experience, and it's not all perfect, I understand. I was in that, but I'm still in that boat. I'm just a little bit further along in the journey and able to speak about it when I wasn't for almost the better part of a decade. And that's it. That's part of it. And sometimes I feel it's overshadowed but you have to look at everything balanced as a whole, the experience and moving forward. I go back and I've been asked what it meant when my grandfather said, "You can't die, you have work to do." And they said, "Well, did you get any more detail?" I said, "No, that was it." And I don't know what that really meant, but I know I'm here. And, I was given a second chance. I should have not survived. I should have, at a very minimum, had some significant damage done because of lack of oxygen. And I walked out of that hospital. And I look at that, and if I can, by speaking about this and sharing my story on platforms like yours and others, reach one person by my story, and something I say resonates with them or connects with them when they think they don't have anyone to speak to, because this is a very niche topic. It's a very personal topic. It's a very deep, non-mainstream topic to discuss: death, dying, consciousness, afterlife, and help someone, then it's worth it to me. And that's the work that I'm focusing on, that I can do and give back, because that's the least I can do as a thank you to being here and having the opportunity to speak about it and help others and be in a position of service to give back. And that's what I can do. I could, honor those that helped me in the hospital, and honor those that have helped me along the way, to then give back to those around me or people I never meet. And that's why I do it. I don't know who watches or who listens to this, but I'm going to put it out there. And that's why I do it, to help, even if it's one person for one moment, to give them peace or an understanding or something that they were looking for that they couldn't find elsewhere. I will fill that niche. That's why I do this. And that's why I'm going to continue to do that, to speak about this.
Thank you for, sharing your message so openly and honestly for those that are needing it in some, whatever capacity it might be. Can I just ask you a few questions?
Absolutely. Yes.
Did you ever, well, life, there's no regrets. Did you ever regret the choice to come back to your physical incarnation?
No, but I don't feel I even had a choice. But I don't. Very vividly in that moment, I remember thinking, I don't want to die and fighting not to die. But it was very clear. It's like, you're not dying. And I don't at all regret. I feel life is so precious and can be so beautiful, but yet it could also just be so absolutely insane and traumatic and violent, and it's everything. And, with that question, I want to go into, one of the main feelings, or I don't know the right word, again, language is limiting, but the concept and understanding of gratitude was what was the most strongest emotion that I came out of, I could say, from that experience. The gratitude that I was given a second chance when many people are not. And I'm sure they would have taken the second chance, but that was not an option in their situation. And I have to, you have to make the most of that. So I have no regret not coming back. I'm supposed to be here, and I'm figuring out what I have to do, and I'm going to, lead with service and love and gratitude. And that's going to be my guide.
And of course, you talk about your consciousness completely changed. You're a new version of you. I loved it when you spoke about how you realized that nothing was coming with me, no material possessions, not my body, not my iPhone. So often we get attached to external things, I guess. Do you obviously we need to survive, and we like certain comforts, but how has that changed your life, not relying so much or placing such importance on your external landscape or material possessions or things?
Well, I think it's a balance. Everyone wants comfort and nice things, and to be able to, live the life they want to live, whatever that may be. And I think there's two ways to answer that. Anyone can obtain whatever they like, I always think it's the consciousness behind it. Is it, for yourself and for others to share, or is it just for yourself and you're coming from a very selfish, greedy, perspective on you're obtaining wealth or material. But if you're doing that with a consciousness of love and, hey, I'm going to give back, and I know I can do so much if I have this resource, that's great. And, it's also, I think it's none of my business how other people live. And I live the way I feel I should, and everyone else can do as they must. I feel it's a balance. We live in a very, especially in the United States, a very consumption driven society. And I mean, it's all around. And I just, you have to live within our society. You have to live within community, but you can live so in a very balanced, healthy way. And it's still a work in progress, but I can say I don't have a major emphasis on things. I like nice things, but I understand their role and value, and their value isn't much. It's just, all right, that's great. I mean, how often have, you looked at something and it's on sale, it's on price in one store, then 6 months later, it's half the price. I mean, we just put numbers on things, like we make them up of what something's worth. We can get into all of that, value of it. But, I know what's most important to me are people, experiences, and community above all. That's it. I don't ever put anything material beyond that. So for someone that, is looking for, if I can give an answer, I'd say the value is on people, experiences, and community. And that's what matters most to me. And nothing material will ever even come close to that category, period.
I just also wanted to ask, what would you say to someone who's in the process of dying?
I'm often asked with that question, and also, do I have a fear of dying?
Yes, that's a very common question as well.
Prior to my NDE, I never thought about it. I mean, I don't know many, young adults that do. I just never thought about it. I was focused on other things. So I never went in with any notion, but I can say this, having kind of, I like to say, open the door and stepped 1 foot into that realm, and then kind of got pulled back, or pushed back, or fell back, or came back. There was no fear. It made more sense to me in those few moments than reality right now does, if that makes any sense. And again, we don't have the language to describe that situation, because it's not a situation we live in. You just can't describe it. But I would say, if someone wanted an answer, I would say it is euphoric, blissful, loving, natural. And it's supposed to happen, and it's okay. And you'll be okay.
You also mentioned that it felt like home. Does that imply that you'd been there before in some way, or you were familiar with that feeling, that sensation, that experience?
I think so. I feel so. I do. I've never felt that way since. I've never felt that way ever in my life in those few moments. It just was so natural.
And sorry, please go ahead.
Oh, no, that's it. Again, the language is limiting, but I could say
you're doing natural. A good job. Your grandfathers, have you had any communication with them since that time?
That's a great question. Some other effects from that was, I always grew up very intuitive. So from the NDE, I've done a lot of work with mediumship and psychic ability and a high level of intuition. And now I don't know if that experience gave me those skills, whether they enhanced the skills I had or they uncovered the skills I already had. But I've done a lot of work within that realm. And to best answer that question is, I can tap into that, and I can get messages using mediumship, or really understanding or communicating with the spirit world. That's something I'm able to do. I don't do it professionally for others, but I use it for myself and for my family.
People often say that they return with certain capabilities or gifts after their NDE. I know you just spoke about your intuitive gifts may have enhanced. Was there any other significant insights or gifts that you felt you received? Or maybe you're in the process. I'm answering your question. Maybe you're in the process.
Other than the mediumship, the psychic ability, the high. I mean, I was pretty intuitive prior, and I was pretty spiritual. But we would say I'm sure it increased, and maybe it was the NDE or practice. But I would say not the best, but the understanding of gratitude and that balancing, grounding, acceptance, and really the sense of gratitude is by far an ability. And I think we maybe look at gratitude as a trait, where really it's an ability to be in a state of gratitude. It takes work. It's very difficult. Spirituality is not easy. Changing, growing, transforming, integrating is really tough work. Like, it's not easy at all. At least it wasn't for me. I don't know. Maybe it's easy for some others. I don't know. For me, it was a lot of work, a lot of draining work. But I think I like to classify gratitude as a skill, because you have to constantly recheck yourself, reevaluate, because life gets crazy. Unfortunately, I'm not just hanging out, in a hippie commune here. I'm building a business, working, functioning, sitting in traffic, going through an airport, doing all the day-to-day daily activities. And it's not the most conducive to a very blissful, enlightened spiritual life. And you have to make a conscious effort and intention to integrate that and have a balance and stay in a certain states of gratitude or whatever that may be. And it's work. It is deliberate, I would say. I've learned.
I can see how grateful you are for life as well. As you said, you did get a second chance, and going back to that gratitude and saying spirituality isn't always easy. I always say it's so important to ask yourself questions you don't know the answers to, or get curious. It might not always be easy, but it's very rewarding.
Absolutely. It's been a tough process, but it's also been a beautiful process. And I've met some absolutely amazing people. And I'm very much looking forward to the future and getting out there and being open and going from there.
Do you have an EpiPen that hasn't expired?
I do.
Thank goodness.
I have a couple, actually. There's several strategically placed, my briefcase, car, desk drawer, everywhere, and they are
and
all
a medical plan.
And a plan. We know exactly what to do. Yes.
Amazing. Well, Chris Kito, thank you so much for being on Passion Harvest. I can't wait to see how your life evolves, and I'm sure it will continue to, and I wish you the utmost success. Thank you for being so honest and open and sharing pieces of you with the audience today.
Thank you. And again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I am appreciative of this and you to take time. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you liked this episode, please do subscribe for weekly passionate, inspirational interviews.